March 27, 2026. Inside the High Security Data Processing Center at the U.S. Geological Survey's Alaska Volcano Observatory, a team of geophysicists has just visualized something that was supposed to be a ghost of the prehistoric past. What you are looking at is not a static relic of geological history. It is a live, pressurized, and rapidly evolving threat. For decades, the Sitkinak submarine caldera, located less than 40 miles off the southern coast of Kodiak Island, Alaska, was considered a dormant scar on the floor of the North Pacific. But new data, processed in real time using advanced seismic tomographic imaging, has revealed a reality that changes everything we thought we knew about supervolcanoes. This is not a slow, millennial-scale progression. It is happening right now, in the dark, under 6 kilometers of seawater and crust. The scientists who mapped this reservoir have reached a conclusion that shatters the existing models of volcanic longevity. The magma reservoir that fueled the largest volcanic eruption of the last 10,000 years has not only been located, it has been found to be in a state of aggressive, active recharge. The Sitkinak caldera lies almost entirely submerged, hidden by the turbulent waters of the Gulf of Alaska. This invisibility is the primary reason it remains a name unknown to the general public, even though it was the site of the Akamai event, the single largest volcanic eruption of the Holocene epoch. 7,300 years ago, this system detonated with a force that defies modern comparison, releasing a volume of magma so immense that the Earth's crust simply gave way, collapsing inward to form a jagged 19-mile-wide crater on the ocean floor. On the Volcanic Explosivity Index, this was a VEI 7 event. To put that in perspective, the 1912 eruption of Novarupta in the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, the most powerful eruption of the 20th century, was a VEI 6. The Sitkinak eruption was 10 times more powerful. It didn't just affect Alaska. It buried the entire Pacific Northwest under a shroud of glass-rich ash, triggered tsunamis that rearranged the coastlines of California and Hawaii, and left a chemical signature in the ice cores of Greenland. The data released this week by researchers from the University of Washington and the Alaska Volcano Observatory confirms that the beast never actually died. Since that cataclysmic collapse, the system has been quietly rebuilding. For the last 3,900 years, a new massive lava dome has been extruding from the center of the caldera, fueled by a steady upward migration of molten rock. But the true horror lies deeper. Using a fleet of autonomous underwater vehicles and an array of ocean-bottom seismometers, the team has successfully peered into the primary reservoir that was supposedly emptied 7 millennia ago. They found a low-velocity anomaly so massive and so distinct that it leaves no room for scientific doubt. The chamber is filling again. The Akamai reservoir is back, and it is being fed by an entirely new, primitive source of magma rising directly from the Earth's mantle. The clock isn't just ticking, it's accelerating. The geographic isolation of the Aleutian Trench is no longer a shield. It is a mask for a process that could, at any moment, disrupt the global climate and the very foundation of American maritime infrastructure. This is the first time we have seen the internal plumbing of a submarine supervolcano with this level of precision, and the data suggests we are standing on the precipice of a geological transition that our civilization is fundamentally unprepared to handle. At 8:14 a.m. on March 27, 2026, the scientific community received a shockwave that didn't register on seismographs, but on the screens of every major geophysical institute in the United States. Researchers from the University of Washington, in a joint venture with the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, and the Alaska Volcano Observatory, AVO, published the results of the Project Deepwatch seismic survey. This was the culmination of an 18-month mission utilizing the research vessel Marcus G. Langseth, equipped with high-resolution submarine airguns and a network of 150 ocean-bottom seismometers, OBS, deployed across the Sitkinak seafloor. The objective was to map the structural integrity of the crust following a series of unexplained warm tremors detected in late 2025. What they found was a massive low-velocity anomaly, a signature of molten material stretching across 30 kilometers of the subsea floor. The technical precision of the data is unprecedented. In geophysics, seismic imaging relies on the velocity of sound waves. They race through the dense, cold basalt of the North Pacific floor, but slow to a crawl when hitting the viscous, semi-liquid state of a magma body. The OBS arrays recorded a delay zone so pronounced that scientists could delineate the reservoir's borders with surgical accuracy. This anomaly sits at a critical depth of between 2.5 and 6 kilometers, 1.5 to 3.7 miles, beneath the ocean floor. To put that in perspective, the pressure at those depths, combined with the heat of the reservoir, creates a powder keg effect that is held back by a thinning layer of oceanic crust. Dr. Marcus Thorne, a lead geophysicist at the AVO, noted in the report that the geometry of this reservoir isn't just a stagnant pocket of heat. It is a pressurized, lens-shaped body that matches the exact footprint of the VEI-7 eruption that decimated the region 7,300 years ago. The chamber hasn't just survived, it has reconstituted. The chronology of this discovery began with a shift in the global navigation satellite system data. In February 2026, stations on Sitkinak Island and the southern tip of Kodiak recorded a subtle but persistent outward tilt. GNSS sensors showed a 12 cm lateral offset, a bulge, indicating that the seafloor was being pushed upward by internal pressure. By March 12th, harmonic tremors, which are the heartbeat of moving magma, were localized at 15 kilometers depth, suggesting a vertical migration of fluid from the mantle into the shallow crust. But the defining revelation of the March 27th paper is the chemical fingerprinting of the system. By analyzing tephra and glass shards collected from the growing lava dome at the center of the caldera, the team discovered a compositional schism. If this was old magma left over from the prehistoric eruption, it would be evolved rhyolite, silica-rich and depleted of certain trace elements. Instead, the samples show a high concentration of magnesium and mantle-derived isotopes. This is fresh magma. It is hotter, more gas-rich, and arriving from the depths of the Aleutian subduction zone, where the Pacific plate is being forced under the North American plate. This is a process of active recharge. The report estimates that since the dome began growing 3,900 years ago, nearly 350 cubic kilometers of new magma has been injected into the shallow reservoir. The implications for US infrastructure are catastrophic and immediate. The Sitkinak caldera sits directly beneath the Great Circle shipping routes, the primary maritime artery connecting the port of Anchorage and the port of Seattle to the global economy. Beneath these waters lie the fiber optic cables that provide the high-speed data backbone for the entire Pacific Northwest and Alaska's military installations. If the reservoir's roof fails, a process that can be triggered by a common magnitude 7.0 earthquake along the nearby Aleutian Trench, the resulting phreatomagmatic explosion would occur under 2 kilometers of water. This wouldn't just be a volcanic eruption, it would be a steam-driven detonator. The thermal expansion of seawater contacting a 1200 degrees Celsius magma body of this scale would generate a tsunami that would reach the city of Kodiak in under 15 minutes, with the port of Anchorage and the refineries of the Kenai Peninsula facing a wall of water and ash-choked air shortly after. The scientists aren't just looking at a map, they are looking at a countdown. The reinjection model proves that supervolcanoes do not need tens of thousands of years to prime themselves for a second act. They can reload in a geological heartbeat. We are watching the reloading happen in real time. The revelation from the Sitkinak seafloor has sent a tremor through the halls of the USGS Volcano Science Center in Menlo Park, California. The data doesn't just describe a local threat, it provides a terrifying new blueprint for how the most dangerous geological systems on the American continent actually function. For decades, the prevailing scientific consensus was that once a supervolcano, a system capable of a VI8 or high VI7 eruption, emptied its primary chamber, it would take tens of thousands, perhaps hundreds of thousands of years of tectonic stagnation to prime the system again. We believed we were safe because the cool-down period was thought to be immense. Sitkinak has just proven that theory wrong. To understand the scale of what we are facing, we must look at the historical parallels etched into the American landscape. 7,300 years ago, the Sitkinak eruption released an estimated 500 cubic kilometers of dense rock equivalent (DRE) material. For comparison, the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, the most destructive volcanic event in modern US history, released just 0.25 cubic kilometers of DRE. Sitkinak was 2,000 times larger. The 1912 Novarupta eruption on the Alaska Peninsula, which darkened the skies over Juneau and caused acid rain to fall as far away as Vancouver, Washington, was a mere fraction of the Sitkinak event. If Sitkinak were to repeat its Holocene performance today, the volume of ash would be enough to bury the entire state of Texas under an inch of glass shards, or cover the Pacific Northwest in a suffocating layer of gray grit several feet deep. But the most alarming aspect of the March 2026 study is the coupled system analysis. Dr. Elena Vance, a senior volcanologist with the USGS, noted that the Sitkinak reservoir is not an isolated pocket. It is physically coupled to the Aleutian subduction zone, a 2,500-mile-long tectonic conveyor belt, where the Pacific plate is forced beneath the North American plate. This subduction process generates intense heat and flux melting, pumping fresh, gas-rich magma into the shallow crust at rates we previously thought impossible. The recharge documented at Sitkinak is a direct result of this tectonic engine. This discovery forces a terrifying reevaluation of the Yellowstone Plateau volcanic field and the Long Valley caldera in California. Yellowstone's magma reservoir sits between 3 and 8 kilometers below the surface of Wyoming, a depth range that is a near-perfect match for the pressurized chamber identified beneath Sitkinak. If Sitkinak is being actively refilled by mantle-derived magma in a window of just a few thousand years, our dormancy models for Yellowstone may be dangerously optimistic. The new magma signature found at Sitkinak, defined by high-temperature basaltic injections, is the exact same trigger mechanism scientists fear could destabilize the rheolitic cap over the Yellowstone reservoir. When fresh 1200 degrees Celsius mantle magma hits a cooler, silica-rich reservoir, it doesn't just sit there. It creates a massive increase in lithostatic pressure and volatiles. It is a chemical detonator. Statistical models run by the National Center for Atmospheric Research (NCAR) in Boulder, Colorado, suggest that a modern VEI-7 event at Sitkinak would trigger a volcanic winter across the continental United States. The injection of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere would reflect solar radiation, potentially dropping average temperatures in the Great Plains by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius for a decade, collapsing the American breadbasket and the global food supply. Furthermore, the submarine nature of this system adds a catastrophic layer of hydrovolcanic coupling. Unlike land-based volcanoes, Sitkinak's eruption would involve the instantaneous flashing of billions of gallons of seawater into steam. This is the fuel-coolant interaction, FCI. The resulting expansion would trigger mega tsunamis with calculated run-up heights of 100 feet along the rugged coastlines of the Gulf of Alaska. The history of the 1964 Good Friday earthquake, the most powerful earthquake recorded in North American history, provides a grim preview of the regional vulnerability. That event caused the seafloor to shift by 30 feet, launching tsunamis that devastated the city of Kodiak and reached as far south as Crescent City, California. But a Sitkinak collapse would be different. It wouldn't just be a shift of the seafloor, it would be the disappearance of it. A 19-mile-wide crater collapsing inward would displace a volume of water so vast it would create a negative wave followed by a surge of energy that would challenge every seawall from Anchorage to San Diego. The scientists at the Alaska Volcano Observatory are no longer asking if these systems can reload quickly. They are now staring at the data that proves they already have. For Dr. Sarah Miller, a senior geochemist at the Alaska Volcano Observatory in Anchorage, the breakthrough didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a sentence. On the night of March 28, 2026, she sat in a dim office overlooking the Cook Inlet, staring at the isotopic ratios of the newest rock samples retrieved from the Sitkinak seafloor by the deep-sea submersible Elvin. The numbers on her screen, specifically the helium-3 to helium-4 ratios, were off the charts. "This isn't recycled crust," she told her colleagues in a recorded emergency briefing. "This is primitive high-temperature material straight from the mantle. It's as if the Earth has opened a direct vein into the Sitkinak reservoir. We aren't looking at a dying system. We are looking at a system that is being supercharged from below." The human cost of this scientific reality began to ripple through the coastal communities of the Gulf of Alaska within hours of the report's release. In the city of Kodiak, Captain Elias Thorne of the U.S. Coast Guard 17th District found himself presiding over a logistical nightmare. Kodiak is not just a fishing village. It is a vital strategic hub for the North Pacific. If Sitkinak goes, there is no plan B for the Gulf, Thorne remarked during a meeting with FEMA Region 10 officials. The Great Circle shipping route, the maritime highway that carries billions of dollars in cargo between the port of Seattle and East Asian markets, passes directly over the Sitkinak danger zone. A single submarine eruption of the scale indicated by the reservoir size would not only create a navigational hazard of floating pumice and ash, but would likely sever the undersea fiber optic cables that provide 90% of Alaska's high-speed data and military communications. In Crescent City, California, a town with a tragic history of Pacific-wide tsunamis, the news prompted a different kind of dread. Maya Lopez, a third-generation fisherman and local business owner, remembers the stories of the 1964 disaster that leveled her grandfather's shop. "We live by the sea, so we respect it," she said, looking out at the breakwater. "But a supervolcano? How do you prepare for a wave that isn't just water, but a slurry of boiling ash and seafloor?" The USGS Tsunami Prediction Center in Palmer, Alaska, has already begun running worst-case scenario models. A collapse of the Sitkinak caldera floor, now proven to be weakened by the 6-kilometer deep magma lens, could displace enough water to generate a wave that would hit Kodiak in 12 minutes, seaward in 35, and reach the coast of Washington and Oregon within 4 hours. The economic fallout is estimated to be staggering. The port of Anchorage handles over 74% of all goods entering the state of Alaska. A prolonged volcanic event at Sitkinak would effectively isolate the state, requiring a massive multi-billion-dollar airlift operation to prevent a total collapse of the supply chain. Economists at the University of Alaska Fairbanks have projected that the immediate disruption to maritime trade, combined with the loss of the North Pacific salmon and pollock fisheries, the most productive in the United States, could exceed $65 billion in the first 6 months alone. The acidification event is another silent killer. The release of massive quantities of sulfur dioxide into the cold waters of the Gulf would create localized dead zones, decimating the fragile ecosystems that support the American fishing industry. In the Pacific Northwest, the threat to the power grid is equally severe. High-voltage transmission lines in Washington and Oregon are vulnerable to flashover events caused by volcanic ash. Even a thin coating of conductive Sitkinak ash carried south by the prevailing winds of the Aleutian Low could short-circuit the transformers that provide power to the Seattle-Tacoma metropolitan area. The system is built for rain and wind, noted Greg Harrison, a grid engineer for the Bonneville Power Administration. It is not built for millions of tons of microscopic glass shards that are electrically charged. We are looking at a potential regional blackout that could last for weeks, if not months. Back at the AVO, the clock is ticking atmosphere has become palpable. The scientists are no longer focused on long-term research. They are focused on real-time monitoring. Every microquake, every 5 mm shift in the seafloor recorded by the GNSS sensors is now treated as a potential precursor. The discovery that the magma is new and mantle-derived means the internal pressure is increasing at an exponential rate. There is no historical precedent for how a submarine supervolcano reacts to such an aggressive recharge. We are in uncharted territory, Dr. Miller concluded. The Sitkinak caldera is a loaded gun, and the Earth is currently pulling the trigger. As we look toward the horizon of the late 2020s, the data coming out of the Sitkinak submarine caldera suggests that the United States is entering a period of geological volatility unlike anything seen in recorded history. The new magma injection model, confirmed in 2026, has shifted the focus from static monitoring to active crisis projection. Based on the current rate of seafloor inflation, now measured at an alarming 22 centimeters per year near the caldera's central dome, the USGS and the Alaska Volcano Observatory have developed a 5-year stress model. This forecast indicates that the structural integrity of the overlying crust, thinned by 7 millennia of erosion and tectonic stretching, may reach its breaking point by the end of the decade. This is no longer a question of if, but a calculation of when the internal lithostatic pressure overcomes the weight of the North Pacific Ocean. The spreading risks of a Sitkinak reactivation extend far beyond the immediate blast zone. The most critical vulnerability lies in the trans-Pacific supply chains and the energy corridors of the American West. The port of Anchorage, already grappling with the logistical challenges of its northern latitude, faces total obsolescence in a post-eruption scenario. If the caldera floor undergoes even a partial collapse, the resulting sediment plumes and floating pumice rafts would render the Cook Inlet unnavigable for years. But the impact on the lower 48 is where the scale of the disaster becomes truly national. The Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport is currently the 4th busiest cargo hub in the world by tonnage. It serves as the primary technical stop for heavy freighters moving between the manufacturing hubs of Asia and the distribution centers of the American Midwest. A sustained ash column from Sitkinak rising into the jet stream would effectively sever this global conveyor belt, forcing a redirection of air traffic that the existing infrastructure in Seattle, Portland, and San Francisco is not equipped to handle. In the Pacific Northwest, the Cascadia coupling is the new frontier of scientific concern. Geophysicists at Oregon State University are now investigating whether the massive pressure changes within the Sitkinak Reservoir could act as a tectonic trigger for the Cascadia subduction zone. The North American plate is a single interconnected unit. The stress loading caused by a magmatic surge in the aleutians does not happen in a vacuum. It migrates. There is a terrifying possibility that the reawakening of the Sitkinak supervolcano could provide the final nudge needed to release the 300-year build-up of strain along the coast of Washington and Oregon, leading to a dual disaster scenario that would redefine the geographic and economic reality of the United States. The infrastructure of the 21st century, our fiber optic cables, our precision-timed power grids, and our satellite-dependent navigation systems, is uniquely vulnerable to the primitive forces of a VEI-7 event. Unlike the agrarian societies of the past, our civilization relies on a level of atmospheric and maritime stability that a submarine supervolcano can dismantle in a matter of hours. The Sitkinak model has now been applied to Yellowstone, and the results are sobering. If a submarine system can reload its primary chamber with mantle fresh magma in less than 4,000 years, we must accept that the geological clock of the American interior may be much further along than our previous models suggested. The chemical signatures of new magma are being sought in the thermal pools of Wyoming and the seismic swarms of Lone Valley, California, with a new sense of urgency. The finale of this story is not written in ink, but in the seismic records and the isotopic ratios of the North Pacific floor. We are witnessing the rebirth of a giant. The scientists who mapped the Sitkinak Reservoir have given us the most detailed warning in human history, but science can only observe, it cannot intervene. The magma continues to rise, the seafloor continues to bulge, and the tectonic plates continue their relentless grinding march. The Sitkinak caldera is a reminder that we live on a planet that is fundamentally restless, governed by cycles that operate on a scale of power that dwarfs our highest technologies. As the sensors in the Gulf of Alaska continue to broadcast their data, the message is clear. The Earth is not a static stage for human history, but a dynamic and often violent engine of change. Follow the data, respect the cycle, and understand that in the face of the Sitkinak's inevitable return, our only true defense is the clarity of our scientific foresight. The clock is ticking, and the reservoir is full.